everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I have an idea. And it might be a bad one, but I'm gonna see it through anyway. So today I'm going to be starting a reading vlog of this book, 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. And you might say, how is that an idea? That might be a bad idea. This is a COVID-19 quarantine thriller. And in case you didn't know, we're still in the midst of COVID-19. When I first heard about this book, I was like, absolutely not. I will not be reading that. That is too soon. I'm not ready for that. Why would I want to read about being stuck in quarantine when I lived through it? Doesn't sound like a good time. And then I got a little more curious. The idea of this book actually sounds pretty interesting. So this is a story set in, I think, Ireland, where this couple meets in a supermarket and they start dating the same week that COVID reaches Irish shores. So that was 56 days ago. Then 35 days ago, the guy suggested that they move in together so that lockdown wouldn't keep them apart. So that's after 21 days. So 3 weeks into knowing each other, he suggested they move in together because the pandemic was hitting. They were going to be stuck apart from one another. And the girl sees it as an opportunity for the relationship to flourish without the scrutiny of family and friends. But Oliver sees it as a chance to hide who and what he really is. And then today, in present time, detectives arrive at Oliver's apartment to discover a decomposing body inside. So somehow within the span of 56 days, this couple moves in together, gets stuck in quarantine together, and somebody ends up dead. That actually sounds pretty intriguing to me because it's kind of like a perfect crime if nobody knew you guys were dating and associated with one another. It's just a really interesting story. And there's something about like a Irish thriller that I tend to enjoy. So I'm going to give this a chance. I'm going to see how it goes. We're going to see, is it too soon to have a COVID-19 thriller? I've been seeing COVID brought up a little bit in books that I've been reading recently. There are some minor references to COVID, and it's just really interesting to see how authors are getting around that, if they're going to just avoid it in books when they talk about the years 2019 to 20, who knows how long this is going on for, or if they're going to explicitly make it part of the plot. Obviously, this is like, COVID's like a pretty big part of the story. So I'm just interested to see how it goes. I even thought about challenging myself to like quarantine until I finish reading this book, and then I'd probably just finish it in a day because that would be terrible. But I don't want to make myself suffer more than I already have in the past year and a half. So we're just going to go about normal life in the midst of still a pandemic and a potentially increasingly worse pandemic as variants begin to come out. We'll see how this goes. Should be an interesting time. So I have read about the first 50 pages of 56 Days, and I am definitely intrigued by this story so far. And as far as like a thriller goes, I'm very interested in the story and the way that it's being lined up. The way this story is being told is in two different timelines. So you have the present timeline where you're following a detective who is investigating the case of what has happened, where this body has shown up at this apartment complex and you still don't know which body it is, like who ends up dying. And then you're also going back in the past as these two people are forming their relationship from 56 days ago to 52 days ago to 50 days ago, and kind of like leading up to this event. And so that's going back and forth, and I really like that. It's really setting up nice pacing. So as far as just like, am I enjoying this as a thriller book? Yes, so far. I don't necessarily love the detective point of view. I'm not huge on detective point of views. It's just not my favorite thing in thrillers, but it's not bothering me too much yet. We'll see how that part goes. In terms of this being a COVID-19 pandemic thriller, it's a lot. Like, it is a lot. These opening scenes, like from the very first chapter, it's describing the environment of like the crime scene at this apartment complex, and all these people are wearing masks and talking about like 6-foot distancing, and there's just a lot of references to like pandemic culture things, like things that got big in the pandemic, and it just feels very, very weird. I think just usually I'm not really often reading books that are super set in the present moment, like mentioning explaining things that are actually happening in real life, or like who our president is. Often books I read are not really grounded to a specific point in time. And so in general, this is just super different for me to be reading something that is like, oh yeah, it's 2020 and everything that's happening in this world is everything that just happened to you last year. So that is just very weird for me, and that makes me feel like, what is it going to be like to read this book in 10 years or 20 years or 50 years? I just don't know. So it's just a little bit weird to me because it's just new in general. I'm not hating it, but I definitely am like, ooh, I don't know if I like am loving reading about all of these things that we just experience and are still experiencing and may begin to get worse again in the near future. So that's a little bit weird, but it is super relatable. I will say that, because you really understand the culture and the moment and the anxieties people are having. But yeah, so far, I mean, I'm not super far into it, just 50 pages and good vibes so far, interested in the story. It's got me hooked. I want to read another good chunk of this today, and then I'll update you on how I'm feeling. I got fully sucked into this book and I couldn't stop long enough to update between pages 50 until like 200. I just could not stop reading it. There are so many things that this thriller does super well that build intrigue and suspense and really keep you hooked in the story. The first thing is the format. You jump around not only time periods, but also with different perspectives, and you get more perspectives than I even knew were going to be included when I was first starting to read the story. Plus, time does not move in order in this story. It jumps around a lot. So you can be going from 56 days ago to 53 days ago to 28 days ago, back to like 50 something days ago. And so it leaves you just confused enough, but you're still able to follow the story. I think this really just builds the mystery aspect of the story, and you go back in time and forward in time and with one perspective, and then you go back and read a scene from the other person's perspective, and it's just really interesting. However, because of this, I would not recommend reading this book on audiobook. I imagine it'd be super confusing and difficult to follow. The second thing that pulled me in is some more mysteries being unraveled. You begin to learn that maybe, in fact, most definitely, Oliver is not who he says he is. He's got secrets that could be life-changing. But you also start to suspect that Sierra might be hiding things too. After all, it's a pretty strange coincidence that they both just happened to move to Dublin in the past month and so frequently kept bumping into one another. Plus, there's another coincidence, or is it a coincidence, when a woman that Oliver runs into at a bar while he's on a date with Sierra also happens to be living in his same building and may know a thing or two about his dark past. And she might be the cause behind the disaster that happened in the apartment. Overall, this thriller really nails it with the pacing and the intrigue, and I just got totally hooked. Hello again. Sorry that I didn't sit down face to face and update you on what's been going on in this story. I just, like I said, got super immersed in the story, could not stop flipping pages enough to sit down and talk to you. But I am back now. I have slowed myself down, and I'm currently right a little bit after page 200, so I still have about 100 pages left in the book. So I wanted to update you on how things are going now, what I'm feeling about the story, before I finish this entire book and didn't tell you anything about it. So like I was mentioning in the last clips, I'm still really loving the pacing and the intrigue and the format of this story. It really has fully sucked me in. I'm still really curious to know what has happened. There's definitely more information that has been revealed at this point, but I still don't have the full picture. I mean, I would hope I wouldn't with 100 pages still left in the story, but I'm still left wondering what is fully gonna happen, who I can trust and who I can't trust. But what I wanted to talk about at this point was just thinking about this, not just as a thriller, but as a COVID-19 pandemic thriller. I personally think this kind of fails as a COVID-19 pandemic thriller. I feel like there are a lot of missed opportunities and it isn't really delivering what I expected. Some of that could be just due to my expectations, but I think it's natural to have the sort of expectations I did about what this book would be like, because when you tell me there's going to be a COVID-19 quarantine pandemic thriller where this couple moves in together after just meeting and someone ends up dead, I feel like that is advertising to me that there's going to be a lot of claustrophobia with like a really close quarters, locked room kind of mystery thriller vibes. I was really excited for that, but I think these characters spend way too much time outside of the apartment, and the story just spends so much time outside of the apartment in general, that I really feel like it's missing the opportunity to create a lot of tension and suspense by keeping these characters trapped in a very tight, close quarters when they are strangers to one another. You end up spending a lot of time outside of the apartment as they are going to shop at Tesco and going to the parks and going back in time. You're seeing a lot of them going on dates and stuff before they ended up like quarantined together. And you have a detective POV, which is the present day, which is set at the apartment complex, but like that's unconnected from the tension of these two characters being forced there together. So I really just wish that the author would have kept these characters stuck together longer and really spent more time there. I mean, I still have 100 pages left in the book, so that still could be coming, but I really just wish that would have been the majority of the book. I think that really would have just done a really nice job at creating this sense of claustrophobia and panic and survival mode with increased danger, not knowing who to trust. These characters don't know if they can trust one another, trying to escape. I just think that would have been a lot more interesting. What this does as a COVID thriller, it really is just like the circumstances of them moving in together so quickly is how that sets it up. And then you do get the surrounding environment of, like I said, they go to Tesco, so you see like how they have the arrows on the ground to move people in certain ways so that people aren't just like flooding the aisles all at once, and toilet paper going out of stock, and having to wear masks while they're walking around the apartment complex outside of like the actual apartment. But I just don't know what that really adds to the story at this point. I feel like all it did was really set that inciting incident of them deciding to move in together so quickly, and really that could have really been almost anything else. So this isn't giving me exactly what I wanted. However, as a thriller in general, I'm still really enjoying it. So I think it's a good thriller. I just don't know if it's a good like a COVID-19 thriller. Finished reading 56 Days, and I think this is a 5-star read for me. I don't know what's been happening recently, but I've been finding so many 5-star thrillers lately, and it's so rare for me, but I think I'm also just getting a little easier on my ratings. Like if I just have a good time with a thriller, that's enough for me, and I want to give it 5 stars because this book was so much fun. It had me guessing until the very end. It was twisty, it was fast paced. I love the different POVs and the way time was jumping around. It really was just a super fun time. However, like I said before, I still think this is not a great like quarantine thriller. There's just so much time spent not capitalizing on these people being stuck in an apartment together. There's honestly like hardly any time where they're just stuck in the apartment together. It just feels like so much of the story takes place at other times or in other places, and I just really think that was a missed opportunity. But I still think this was 5 stars. Like it was just so much fun. I really had a good time. I kept guessing until the end. I really liked the dynamics of these characters and the surprises that came along the way as you learn more about them and the things they're hiding. I thought they were super interesting. The only thing I didn't really love about the story is the detective POV. I didn't feel like it added a ton to the story, and I almost wish that it would have been accomplished with a different like third party, like a nosy neighbor or something that was trying to piece together what happened rather than it being a detective. It just didn't really feel like it belonged in the story, and so that would really be my only complaint. But still, I just thought this was so fun. I have to give it 5 stars. It would be a lie to myself if I didn't. So overall, I'm really impressed with how this went. I'm really glad I vlogged this experience so I could document reading this book and having so much fun with it. It's gonna be one of my favorite thrillers of the year, but I will caution people not to go into this expecting like a quarantine thriller in the like close quarters sense, but rather to just think about it as a thriller. Because I mentioned this earlier, and what I meant by this was the pandemic was purely in the context of the story as the inciting incident to explain why these characters would move in together so quickly. And you could take the entire pandemic out and pretty much create a very similar story if you just give the character a different motive to be so willing to move in so quickly. Like just them having a past they're hiding themselves, I think is enough. Or if you for some reason have them really down on their luck, they have nowhere else to go, then like easy quick way to get them together. So didn't feel like it was super pertinent. There is an author's note at the end that talks about the pandemic and just the author's time in Ireland as cases of COVID-19 were coming and the 3 different lockdowns that they went in, and how this was like a special escape for them to write this while how they're in the pandemic and in the quarantine. But overall, it just really doesn't add a ton to the story. So if you're hesitating reading this book because you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to read something about COVID-19, while there are many mentions of it throughout the story, it is not really done in a way that like bogs it down too much. I know in the beginning I was saying like, oh, this is kind of a lot, like, oh, they're wearing masks and blah, 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 blah. It was more heavy at the beginning, but after the first like 50 pages, you really kind of just, you don't forget about it, but I don't know, it's just like not a huge part of the story, if that makes sense. So if any of you have read this, I'm definitely super interested to hear your thoughts. Did you enjoy this book as much as I did? What did you think about the COVID-19 aspects of the story? Did you actually think it was too much, or did you feel similar to me and you're like, this didn't really impact the story much? Let me know all your thoughts below and we can chat about it. Also, let me know if you've been reading any other stories that include COVID-19, whether it's a big part of the story or not, and how you feel about it. Do you think it's too soon to be writing COVID-19 quarantine thrillers, or do you think it's kind of weird to not include COVID in your stories? Because I don't know how I stand on that. I kind of could see either way, but I do think if you're going to write and heavily market a story around COVID-19, it probably makes sense for it to be a little bit more of a story. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!